Hello, hello, good afternoon or good evening, depending on the time zone that you're in. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very appreciative of your time and we're excited to have you on board. So we're gonna get started shortly. In the meantime, I do want to remind everyone that we will be recording this session and we will be archiving it as well. So if there's anything for whatever reason you missed today, don't worry, don't fret over it. We will be sharing the slides and we will be sharing the recording to this session. It will live on our TGR Foundation YouTube channel for everyone on the call. So again, no need to feel like, oh my God, I didn't take note of that and so forth, but we will definitely have a lot of great content being shared today and we definitely want questions being asked. So without further ado, we definitely want to get started. And in the meantime, we'd love to see where you're joining us from today. Maybe you can add what city, what state. Would love to hear from you all. And just a little FYI, I'm actually located in California and I'll get started shortly. So if you're not too sure, if you don't see it on your screen, you're actually here because you're going to be learning more about scholarships. And we're just really, really excited to talk about, this topic that I know students have so many questions on. We might have some families, educators on this call as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Debbie from Sacramento for joining us. Hannah, wow, from New Hampshire, really awesome. Monique from Berkeley. I have a good cousin of mine that went to UC Berkeley, so I'm very familiar with the area. Awesome, love, love, love to see that you're all joining us today. And with that said, I am sure you're all very used to this this virtual life, but we definitely want to go over some digital community guidelines beforehand. We're not really asking anyone to turn on their cameras today, but if you feel comfortable, you're more than welcome to. But if you do have a question at any point, please use your raise hand feature. If you're not too sure how to access that, you can actually go on the taskbar below. You'll see participants, and then you'll be able to raise your hand there. Please know that we will be saving some time at the end for questions or perhaps any thoughts or comments that you might have. In addition, we also have our chat box, our infamous chat box that it seems like it's the popular thing to do these days. And I know most people feel comfortable with. I do want to emphasize, if there's anything that at any point we say that you're like, yes, snap those fingers, feel free to do that. You could even text it with some snaps or applause. Please do so. We love reactions on Zoom. And then again, we just ask for, a collaborative environment, and we definitely want to cultivate like all these curiosities that you might have. So please feel free to ask your questions and your thoughts. If you feel more comfortable, asking your questions privately, I will be introducing myself and a colleague of mine, so you know who we are. And with that said, I'll actually have my co-pilot today introduce herself and say a little bit more about what she does and what she'll be doing today.
Thank you, Denise. I'm Christina Fernandez. I'm Senior Director at the TGR Foundation. I oversee all of our college access, college readiness programming, which includes one of our scholarship programs. So I will be interacting with all of you in the chat box, posing some questions in there, also helping Denise out with questions that you may be asking, or letting her know that you've raised your hand so that she can pause and you can ask your questions while she's presenting.
Thank you, Christina. And Christina, feel free to chime in at any point if you have any thoughts of any questions or any information that I even shared today. you know, Christina's definitely a guru in a lot of this information, so she'll definitely have some thoughts at some point. But without further ado, I'm also going to introduce myself. You're probably thinking, like, who is this person that keeps chatting away? My name is actually Denise Hoved. I am the senior manager, and I closely work with our college access and success programs at the TGR Foundation. And, you know, I am very, very passionate about talking to students about, you know, how they can put their best foot forward, whether it's their college applications, whether it's scholarships, whatever the case might be. One of the things that I love to share, because I feel like it resonates with many of our students, perhaps some students on this call, is that I'm a first-generation graduate myself. I know sometimes it can be a little challenging to navigate, especially during, you know, during these crazy virtual times. But I think, you know, this virtual environment has really propelled so many of us to find a lot of neat and cool tools. And I hope we can highlight some of those today for you. So I will say, I will be sharing a lot of information. So please feel free to just add your questions throughout the chat. And if I don't get to it right away, we will have time at the end. But for those that, you know, are new to like what a scholarship could be, is, you know, a scholarship is really a form of financial aid that helps students pay for college. I could imagine that most of you that are on the call, whether you're an educator, whether you're a family member, whether you're a student, you know, you're really trying to find this information to see how you can put your best foot forward, and to see, you know, whether your future college is going to be a good financial fit. And scholarships really do play a big role in that. Also, scholarships can be awarded based on different criteria. And we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. And to clarify, scholarships are free money. Pretty much, you do not have to worry about paying this back. You know, this is like this could be a whole separate financial aid workshop, but scholarships do not have to be paid back, unlike other forms of financial aid that could be offered to students. And one of the things that I really wanted to get started with today, and hopefully you can see it, I do want you to go on, whether it's on your web browser or maybe even on your phone if it's available to you. I want you to list any activities, talents, or hobbies you have been involved with while in high school, or even for educators on this call. What are some activities or hobbies that you know your students might have had as well? So if you can please at this time go to menti.com, and you'll use the code 8707789. Christina, you know, went ahead and provided that in the chat, and I'll go ahead and give you all, you know, maybe a minute or so to check out the menti.com and provide this information. But yes, think about it. What are some hobbies, maybe talents of yours that you might have, activities that you might be involved in your high school, or whether it was your freshman year, maybe your sophomore year, senior year? What are some of those activities? Would love to hear from you. And as you're all doing that, if it's not available to you, feel free to list them on the chat too. Okay. I will say that ever since we started quarantine earlier this year, I started learning the keyboard, which is really new to me. I'm not the most musically inclined person, so that's awesome. Awesome, I see them coming in. All right, so basketball, dirt biking, music, the ukulele. Oh my God, I've had several students know how to play the ukulele. Volunteering at church, community service, soccer. Okay, I see more coming in. Acting, okay, this is neat. Cooking, oof. I could only imagine what you're all cooking up right now. Let's just say that I know the freshman 15 is a real thing when students start college. I think a lot of us can agree to that too. Outreach ambassador, I love that, okay. Love the outdoors. I see robotics club, the suicide prevention campaign, student-led organizations, creating a psychology club, golf, okay, sailing, okay, these are really, really neat. I love all of these different activities you're all providing. So you're probably wondering like, okay, what does this have to do with scholarships? Well, it has everything to do with scholarships. And I found it important to ask this question, not only for students or family members or educators on this call, for you all to see that there's so many things that really make up who you are and what you're a part of. And there's so many different types of scholarships. You know, based on some of the hobbies that you all mentioned or some of the talents or things that you're involved in, it leads me back to, you know, this myth that students have that all scholarships are merit-based. I will say that a good chunk of scholarships, you know, will be based on academics, you know, whether they're looking at grades or they're looking at, you know, what academic achievements you have, your GPA and so forth. But there's so many other scholarships that are available to students that are beyond that. For example, there's athletic scholarships. We actually just had a session last week on college athletes and, you know, how they go about this process. But there's definitely scholarships on that. There's also scholarships on careers that you might be interested in. Specifically, for example, say we have students that are interested in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and math. They might have special projects. I know someone mentioned that they might be interested in robotics. Almost positive that there's scholarships, many scholarships for students that pursue that as a club or activity within their high school. There's also scholarships at the corporate levels. So for example, like big companies like Coca-Cola, Microsoft, Burger King, and so forth offer many scholarships to students. I know some of them might have deadlines in the fall. And FYI, if you're probably wondering like, oh my God, are we going to get a list of all of these scholarship opportunities or, you know, search engines and so forth? You will. I will be sending an email to all of our registrants on Eventbrite with the cool 3-pager resource handout for you that we compiled. In addition, there could also be scholarships specific to the college institution. And obviously this would, you know, this would occur once the student actually gets to the college campus, or there are some colleges that as the students are applying to their respective campus, they also have to apply to scholarships as well. I always give this one as an example. For example, there's the University of Southern California, also known as USC. I know when students apply for their college, usually their college applications have to be submitted towards the end of December. But in order to be considered for merit-based scholarships, students actually have to apply at an earlier deadline. So I would actually encourage students, especially if we have any high school seniors or even juniors, for you to start kind of looking at like what specific scholarship deadlines do some of these colleges that I'm interested in have. So very, very important for you all to know. In addition, there's community-based scholarships. So one of the tips that I would provide for students is think about or even Google what community-based organizations are around you. You know, we asked earlier where you're all coming from. You know, I saw folks from like Georgia and New Hampshire, you know, from California. So locally, what community-based organizations may offer these scholarships? They might also offer scholarships on skill or talent-based. One of the scholarships that I love to highlight, and it's like slipping my mind right now, but I know we might have some Star Wars fans on this call. But I know there's a scholarship for students that actually know the language that they speak in the Star Wars movies. So that's really unique. And again, that goes back to my point that you don't have to be a straight A student to apply to scholarships. And that's something for you all to know. There's also scholarships based on background. So for example, there might be scholarships for special needs students. Perhaps, there might be medical issues or needs that you've experienced, for yourself or even within your family. They might also offer scholarships based on like ethnicity, gender, even religious affiliation. So again, there's just so much out there. And it might be a combo of a little bit of all of these things that I just mentioned. So just keep that in mind. And going back to that mentee where we just asked you all, these are things that make you special. I mean, I'll be honest, I do not know how to play the ukulele. So if there were to be a scholarship for that, that's already one less student that would apply for that, because that's not a talent that they might have and another student does. But that doesn't mean that that student that doesn't know how to play the ukulele doesn't have any talents and so forth. So again, it's a matter of highlighting like what are you good at, what are you involved in, and so forth. And with that said, one of the things that I like to talk to students about is the scholarship application. Obviously, the application itself can vary from college campus to organization to the company. It could look very different what they're asking for. I will say that both Christina and I, we're definitely on a scholarship committee every single year for our own Orwood Scholar program, and we get to see hundreds of nominations and applications of students, and there's a lot of things that we see differently within each organization, and these are just some that I'd like to highlight. So for example, most, I will say not all, but most organizations, especially if they're merit-based, if they're based on grades or GPA, they'll definitely want to require a high school transcript, or they'll ask for a high school transcript. You'll see in parentheses that I actually have official versus unofficial. This is really important to highlight because many students sometimes don't understand the difference between an official and unofficial transcript. And an official transcript is actually, usually signed, sealed, and delivered to the scholarship organization or to the college campus that's requesting this information. So something for you all to know. Essays. Essays are also very common. And students, typically have to write a personal statement, or they have to write, short answers, to some of the questions the scholarship organization might have. And again, this is something for you all to keep in mind. Letters of recommendation are also very important if they're asked for. And I know, some scholarship organizations may ask for this as well. One tip I would give, and this same tip I would give to students, is make sure that whoever your recommender is, that you're asking someone that knows you very well. In addition, a lot of times these scholarship organizations might have a specific prompt for the recommender. Sometimes students think that, okay, I'll ask this teacher or I'll ask this mentor of mine to write one letter recommendation that is a one size fits all for my college apps and for scholarships. But many times they forget that that scholarship organization might have very specific questions. I know that one that comes to mind is the Gates Scholarship. I know that when I've written recommendations for students, they actually have very specific questions where it's not, me just easily uploading a letter and that's going to be a one size fits all for that scholarship. You want to make sure, especially if we have any educators on the call, is that you tweak whatever verbiage that you might have for that student. And for the students, I would also advise you to make sure that that teacher or that educator that is doing your letter of recommendation really tweaks it accordingly. I would say that an academic resume would also be something that students should be prepared to possibly submit. I know that there are some scholarship organizations that might say, oh, you know, if you would like to provide any additional information, there's like an option where it says it's not required but highly recommended. I always tell students, if it's highly recommended, just do it. Just get it done. Don't hesitate. And if we have any students on this call that are thinking like, well, what is a resume? I'll actually be sharing a tool through our TGR EDU Explore website that students can use to kind of brainstorm what a resume could look like. And if we have some time at the end, I'll definitely show you as well. They might require you to do a video recording or perhaps an interview. If this is the case, especially in this virtual world, I would definitely have students, just practice a little bit with the questions. I always, advise our students, like, I'm available if you need to practice with someone and practice, at least 4 or 5 questions. I'd be more than happy to assist. Again, find a mentor that can help you with this, because I know it could be a little nerve-wracking. Like, what should I wear? What should I have in the background? And those are all little things that sometimes we need to think about a little bit more thoroughly. And last but not least, if it is a need-based scholarship, the likelihood of the organization asking for a tax transcript or tax returns or any sort of financial document is very common. But again, also, make sure you read thoroughly what they need. And if it's something that's not listed and it seems a little off that they're asking for information, especially if it's not a need-based scholarship, you could always reach out to the point of contact at the organization and ask them politely, like, oh, is there a reason why this information is being asked for? Because I could understand that tax transcripts and financial documents have a lot of sensitive information. So we just want to be careful with that. So again, these are just some things that could be asked in the scholarship application. So look, let's take a deep breath. I know there was a lot of information shared right there and then, but one last tip I'd like to provide to students is make sure you're taking screenshots of any documents that you're submitting virtually, or just keeping copies of this information. For example, say you're using an online scholarship portal to submit all of your information and you are good to go, you hit the submit button. I always tell students, make sure you take a screenshot where it says you have successfully submitted your scholarship application. This is important because you never know what kinks could happen in this virtual world, and you want to make sure that you're covered on your end. And I know there's a question asked, Christine asked a question like, utilizing your network, are you part of a program where staff can review your application materials? Would love to hear from you all if you want to, provide some info in the chat with that. And I want to make you a part of this as well. So this is a mock application that we have for, this is a totally fake scholarship. I get this question a lot, like, oh, is this a scholarship I can apply to? So our organization actually created this curriculum where students can review a number of applicants for the Bright Young Champions Foundation. And this is not the entire application, but I just want to give you some insight. And they would look through the letters of rec, the essays, the community service hours, and so forth. And then they were provided with the profile of what this organization was looking for. And our students actually had to decide who they wanted to award a $10,000 scholarship to. And this would create a lot of debate and a lot of conversation with students. They would totally look at like, oh, I didn't like this about this application. There was, the student didn't do this and so forth. So I want to bring it to you, and I would love to hear, some thoughts in the chat. in looking at this page right now, at this sample application, what is something that might be missing or something that you would change for Isabel Castro? What's off? And feel free to private message me again, Denise Oved, if you feel more comfortable doing so. But what's off with this application? There's something a little strange that the student might have missed. I'll give you all like a few seconds to look at. Okay. Yeah, Vic, you got it right on the money. So these are little things that students sometimes might not think are a big deal, but they can be a big deal because this could then lead to an incomplete application. So this student here, Isabel, actually forgot to sign off on her document and she forgot to date it. The date is not as a big deal, but I would say the signature is. And if I'm part of a scholarship committee and I'm looking at this student and there might be hundreds of applications that I'm looking at, for me, it's all about attention to detail. Did this student actually thoroughly look at the application? I want to make sure that they didn't miss providing any information there. So thank you, Vix, so much for participating on this. All right, let's go to another one. Take a quick, 30 seconds here. What seems off in this application? Or what would you change? So Jermaine here took the time to fill out his application, but what would you change specifically? What seems off? Give you all like a few more seconds. And again, if you feel more comfortable. Kylie, yes, Kylie, and hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but Kylie, yes, I would write it in black ink. So perhaps this application didn't explicitly say that it needs to be typed or, it needs to be in blue or black ink, but I always recommend students, if you can type your application, if it's not through an online portal, do your best. But I know that perhaps students might not have access, to a printer or whatever the case might be, to get that typed out, or maybe they get an actual hard copy from a teacher or counselor. Make sure that you're filling it out in black ink, because again, these are very small, minor things that a lot of students might not think, twice about, but this makes a huge difference. And I'll give a quick little example. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, Christina and I have read through hundreds of applications throughout the years of students. And every single year we get so many students that actually write their application in pencil. And let me tell you, no important document should be filled out in pencil. Please find a blue or black ink pen and make sure you sign off with a pen. Alyssa, yes, blue ink is fine too. So thank you for asking that question. Also, do not fill out your application with a black Sharpie. I would say that would be really hard. It would stain your application and so forth. If it's possible for you to get it typed out, that would totally be my first option if possible. But thank you all for participating. Again, these are just really quick little examples of, small mistakes that students make, but at the end of the day, it might set them apart from another student. Shane, okay, the email's kind of weird. Shane, I love that you mentioned this, because that brings me to another point with any scholarship. Make sure that you all have an appropriate email, especially not just with scholarship organizations, but even as you're applying to any important positions, or whether you're applying for college, you want to make sure that you have a professional email. And I can totally have like a full-on session on virtual etiquette or email etiquette for students. So let's talk a little bit about what are some common scholarship mistakes. And I would also love to hear from you all in the chat. if we have any educators, even if you haven't read scholarship applications, what are some like simple mistakes that students just make, you know, on their applications that you've been able to revise over the years? I would love to hear your thoughts as I'm talking about some of these. Again, one of these, and this happens very commonly, is if there's an essay that needs to be written, you must answer the prompt. You know, for example, if the prompt is asking, how has your community contributed to your leadership skills? Okay, it's very specific, right? At that point, you need to talk about what specifically in your community has really enhanced those skills of yours. That doesn't mean that you have to talk about grandma or grandpa and how grandma and grandpa have, you know, helped you as a person. Like they want to learn about you, and they want to learn very specific things. So make sure that you're reading the prompt. And also for our educators, if you're writing a letter of recommendation for a student, make sure that you're also looking at the prompt for the letter of rec, or perhaps the series of questions that you're being asked for that student. In addition, making sure that you're sending the correct documents. Many times students either submit an incomplete application. For example, I'll just give our scholarship, you know, as an example. You know, some of the materials we ask for is, we ask for an essay, we ask for supplemental questions. We also ask for a headshot photo. And in addition, there's a couple of other things. And sometimes students forget to submit a headshot photo, or they forget to submit one of their essays, and then they'll reach back out after the deadline. Personally, for a lot of the committee members, that could totally be a no-no, because at the end of the day, you know, some of these scholarships can be very competitive, and they're really looking at the nitty-gritty to find ways on, like, okay, well, you know what, this student didn't read the directions completely, and they didn't submit this information. Debbie, thank you so much. A big mistake, so Debbie here is saying a big mistake is asking for a letter of recommendation at the last minute. Debbie, yes, oh my gosh, that's happened to me so many times. Yes, if you expect your teacher, your counselor, or your college access mentor, or whomever you're asking for a letter of recommendation a day before, just know that it's probably not going to be the best letter of recommendation. Because at the end of the day, they're probably writing so many other letters of recommendation from students that ask them, you know, weeks, if not months in advance. So if you know the deadlines ahead of time, please make sure that you ask with enough time. Debbie, thank you so much for saying that, because I will say that is one of my biggest pet peeves. So thank you so much for highlighting that. And any other mistakes that you all see, please feel free to mention those in the chat. I would say this is another common one, is not updating your address or your contact information on a scholarship application is actually very crucial. For example, if at any point there's different steps to the scholarship application process, perhaps you know, you might be a semi-finalist, they might require an interview, and then there's like a finalist round. And then in between that time, you either move, or you change your email address, or you change your phone number, and this organization needs to contact you. It is so important that you reach out and ensure that you update that information. It's happened so many times where we've actually wanted to schedule an interview with the student, and we couldn't reach them via email, via snail mail, or by phone. And it became difficult to even reach out to them. And again, you don't want this to happen to you. So make sure that you update this information. And lastly, these aren't all of the scholarship mistakes I've seen, but again, going back, don't fill out in pencil or bright inked pen where it's really hard to see, or it's not very clear or visible. And I would say one of the biggest mistakes that students make is not applying to a scholarship because they think they're not going to receive it, or they're not going to get it. I mean, at the end of the day, like, what's the worst that an organization's gonna say? Like, no, sorry, you didn't receive the scholarship. But the best thing that they can say is like, you know what? You're a finalist. We definitely want to, provide you the scholarship opportunity. I always tell students, don't get so hung up on just applying to the scholarships that are like $10,000 or more or $5,000. Sometimes those small scholarships that, give you $200 here, maybe $500 there, can be very significant, and then they can add up in the sense of covering, small costs, small or big costs that you might have when it comes to your college tuition. So important. So with that said, one of the other things that I'd like to discuss and really talk, to students and our educators about is, keep an eye out for scams. And I think right now, given that we're in this virtual realm, I think obviously it's made it a little bit easier for scammers to create like these, fake opportunities. I would really encourage students to do thorough research and check if the website looks legitimate first. I would say if you've never heard of the scholarship and you're just not too sure whether you should even consider applying to it, feel free to reach out to a teacher or counselor or college access mentor that might know, and they might be familiar with this information. I know that I've had students in the past reach out to me and ask me like, oh, have you ever heard of this scholarship, or have you ever had students apply to this scholarship? If I've never even heard of it, I'll even do my own research myself. I'll see if there's a point of contact to see if I can reach out to them. I would advise the same thing, because you don't want to give confidential information to someone and then they end up using that information to do something else. So definitely be careful out there. I would also say, oftentimes there's, scholarship searches that charge like, and I'm not talking about those apps that you can download on your smartphones, for like 99 cents or $1.99. But I would say for any scholarship search engine that is saying like, oh, you have to pay about $30 a month or $50 a month to apply for scholarships, I would really, really avoid that. And the reason why I say this is because there's so much free information out there. And again, going back to what I said earlier, we're going to be providing almost a 3 to 4 page handout that has so many different scholarship search engines and opportunities that you may want to look at and apply for. So again, I would really, really avoid these type of search engines as best as possible. And anything that says like, oh, we're going to guarantee that you're going to get this scholarship, I mean, really, like, there's nothing really guaranteed. So please make sure that you look at the language and how it's phrased. I think that's very important. I would also say be wary of, unsolicited snail mail or even email. So for example, I would say now that in the virtual world, like if they're saying like, oh, we're going to invite you to this virtual information session, and you're going to pay $50, we're going to guarantee a $1,000 scholarship. That to me is a huge red flag, because you shouldn't have to pay anyone to then be guaranteed a scholarship. It just sounds really weary. And I just have to put it out there, because I remember when I was doing an in-person workshop for parents, I actually had a parent come up to me afterwards, and he mentioned to me that he was paying like, $75 a month, for a search engine to, guarantee scholarships, but his son had not received anything. And, right there and then I told him, you please, like, make sure that you cancel whatever subscription you have and keep an eye on that, because that to me that does not sit well, or it does not sound right to me. And, I already mentioned, feel free to contact your high school guidance counselor if you're kind of curious if the scholarship is legitimate or not. And do your research for the company too, or the organization that might be offering that scholarship. So hopefully that's been helpful so far. But I wanted to also provide some organizations or ways to maybe think about your scholarship search a little differently. And what are some entities that you can actually reach out to and see if they have any scholarships? For example, I would say local businesses. I know I'm actually based out in Southern California. And one of the things that I mentioned to students is like, look within your region and see what markets, what grocery stores, what local businesses might be offering scholarships specifically to students in your area. That's one. Consider charitable groups. You know, what charitable groups are in your local area as well. Simply doing a Google search can help a lot. For example, you can literally put keywords like charitable groups in Anaheim, California, and then you'll get a list. And then at that point, you can see like what websites and so forth you can check out. Community organizations like the Rotary clubs, you know, the VFWs, they might be offering scholarships as well to students. Going back to what I said earlier, there might be national organizations like the Hispanic Scholarship Fund or the African American Caucus that might be offering scholarships, you know, for ethnic and cultural organizations. And lastly, you know, if anyone in your family, particularly, you know, your guardian or your parent might be working for a company, you know, whether they're big or small, ask. You can totally ask and see if they offer a scholarship. I know obviously like bigger companies like Walmart and McDonald's like do offer scholarships for their employees' children, but sometimes these opportunities can be created as long as you ask. So I know it's a lot of information and hopefully you're all like, you know, still sticking through this. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is like, how can you stay organized virtually? I know it's hard. I know it's very difficult. I know it's very difficult to stay motivated and perhaps like on top of tasks. But some things that, you know, I try to remind students about is, you know, make sure you establish a routine. If we haven't, you know, I'd love to learn like how many high school seniors, or if we have any high school students on this call, can you let me know what grade level you're in? I would love to hear this. But specifically for our high school seniors, I understand that it's a lot to have to apply to college and then you have to apply for scholarships as well. I know that's a lot, but make sure that you just schedule maybe 15 minutes a day to work on certain college or scholarship related items. I think it would make it a little easier on you and you wouldn't feel as overwhelmed. And thank you for everyone, whether you private message me or you're saying it in the chat, like, okay, so we have juniors, we have freshmen, we have seniors. Okay, awesome, I love this. Thank you all for sharing this. I would say even for our freshmen and sophomores on this call, you could still be applying to scholarships right now. One scholarship that I do want to highlight is Doodle for Google. That scholarship in particular could actually be applied to kindergarten students all the way through seniors in high school. So make sure you check that one out. I would say create a resume to highlight activities with any accomplishments that you have. So this would help you kind of stay organized as you're filling out scholarship applications, because then at that point you have like one running document that you can reference versus like always trying to like brainstorm all of the things that you have been a part of. And then I would say keep any past essays. This is so important because sometimes you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel every single time you apply to a scholarship that requires an essay. You could possibly just easily tweak it and reuse it. So just make sure that you tweak it accordingly. For example, you know, if you're applying for the Gates scholarship, but you're also applying for Coca-Cola, you don't want to submit, you know, to Coca-Cola like, oh, I would love to be considered for the Gates scholarship, and then you send it to Coca-Cola. You want to make sure that you tweak it accordingly. You still want to make sure that it addresses the prompt. So important. So Christina, would love to have you chime in.
I was just going to say, Denise, one of the questions we received when the participants were registering via Eventbrite was in particular about the essays, and you kind of touched on it a little bit between scholarships, but one question was, what's the difference between the Common App essay and a scholarship essay? So how can they repurpose some of their college application personal statements?
Yeah, I mean, obviously for the common application, and Christina, I would assume that they're referring to the college application, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I would say, again, you have to look at the prompts, like how similar and how distinct are they? If you already wrote your essay for the common application, which, you know, if we have any students on this call that aren't familiar with it, it's the application that a lot of private institutions or a lot of private college institutions use, but there's also some public institutions that use the application as well. They tend to have 7 prompts, and students have to write that essay with a max of 650 words. But say there's a scholarship application that they're filling out, they have to look at the specifics. For example, like what's the word count? You know, what is the prompt specifically asking for, and how can they tweak it accordingly? So I don't know. I don't know, Christina, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think that's helpful. I think the most important thing, as Denise mentioned, is that you're answering whatever prompt it is that they're asking. You know, and putting your time into it. You know, if it's a $500 scholarship, $1,000, you know, $10,000 full tuition scholarship, those essays and those questions are put in there on purpose. You know, that means something to that organization. And so answering what it is that they're asking, you just want to make sure that that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Christina. So, you know, to kind of wrap up, you know, ways to stay organized, I would say is, you know, and you're probably thinking like, this is common sense, but, you know, sometimes we just have to remind ourselves and also be kind to ourselves, because we just have so much information that we're having to keep track of. But what is the best way for you to keep track of all of these things, especially like scholarship deadlines? You know, whether it's a calendar or a planner that you have, whether it's, you know, paper or digital, make sure you use it. And, you know, thank you to the student that's private messaging me and giving me some awesome thoughts. Google Calendar is definitely like a must. I know I use my Outlook calendar religiously, not just for like work purposes, but even for personal things, because I could easily forget, you know, little items that I need to get done. So thank you so much for the students that are private messaging me with some cool stuff. And last but not least, and going back, I think it was Debbie earlier said, like, make sure that you give your, you know, your college counselor or your teacher enough time. I would also schedule a meeting. Like, if you want someone to review or look at your scholarship application before you submit it, do not wait until the, you know, the day before. You also have to be mindful of others' time, because again, you want to make sure they're looking at it as thoroughly as possible. So make sure that you can schedule a meeting, and, you know, now that we're in this virtual world, it makes things a little bit easier. And then I know we got a question in the chat. I'll make sure to get to that shortly. So I want to talk a little bit about digital self-advocacy. I think this is really important. You know, I think students are, you know, sometimes finding, you know, a challenging moments where they're not too sure what next steps or what they should do, you know, when it comes to reaching out to people or reaching out to folks. You know, don't forget, aside from email, there's still the good old phone. You know, a simple phone call can still do a lot of miracles. So if the organization is available via a phone call, feel free to reach out and see if they might be able to answer the questions that you have. In addition, if you know a peer that actually applied to a specific scholarship that you're interested in, I would actually advise students to reach out to that peer and see what tips they may have, or maybe they might tell you what part of the application was very challenging for them, and it'll give you ample time to work on that piece. In addition, I think what's been really cool is that so many scholarships or organizations have utilized their websites to create tutorials or webinars or provide any sort of background information that's helpful for students as they're filling out applications. So again, check this out. I think there's a lot of great tools out there that you can use, and I'm very appreciative of everyone that's on the call today. And last but not least, the good old, social media platforms. I mean, I know so many students are on Instagram, maybe they're on Snapchat. I know TikTok is like definitely the new thing these days. But check out these social media platforms. I know that it depends on families and, what you're allowed to do. But if this is something that you have and your family allows you to have, check out any updates or deadlines or even any relevant information that can help you on that scholarship application. Okay, so there's a question here, and I definitely want to answer this. So scholarships that require essays versus scholarships that don't require essays. Would you advise us to apply for scholarships that require essays because it may be less competitive? That is a really good question. I would actually advise you to apply to any scholarships that you feel fit you and that really, capture your attention. I would say that especially for any scholarship, in addition to the financial portion of it, say the scholarships is offering mentoring or maybe career advising or any sort of like other piece aside the financial aspect, and it really intrigues you, you should apply to it. But that's a really great question. I mean, it's hard to say if it would be like less competitive because I really think it just depends on the organization and and even the company that might be offering this scholarship. For example, I know, and I can't remember the organization's name, but maybe Christina might remember, but it was like the $2,000 no college or no scholarship essay. So again, I am pretty sure that's very competitive because many students are applying to it because they don't have to submit an essay. So it just really varies and it just really depends. But great question. I love that. So now, and I know we're coming close to our time, but I will stay behind to answer any questions that any students have. But I wanted to share some tools, and one of them is you can go to .org. I think this is something that you should check out because the scholarships there actually are set up by month. And I think that's really important because a lot of the students think, oh, I cannot find any scholarships this month because they're only in the fall time. It's really, really important for you all to check out. And even you could even Google like scholarships with November deadlines, scholarships with December deadlines. And I think that's a tip that I would definitely encourage our students to do. And then the other one is Unigo. Unigo is a great scholarship search engine that students can check out. You could also follow their social media handles and their website. I will say that you would have to start an account there, and I will say that you might get swamped with different scholarships on a daily basis. But if you're okay with that, then again, this could be a website that you can check out as well. And again, if you all have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat, and then we'll get to them as well. Here's another resource that I love, is from our TGR EDU Explore website. And I would say, for our educators on this call, check it out because there's actually a full-on lesson plan. And going back to my example earlier, this is actually the mock scholarship application that we provide to students. And you could easily do this in your classrooms, whether it's virtual or if if you're in a hybrid program, this is something that you could easily do with students. And it really helps them understand, like, okay, what really makes up a good scholarship application? The PowerPoint is already there. You could easily download. You don't have to recreate anything. And the entire lesson plan is there as well. And for our students, you could also check out the lesson plan, because there's some handouts that have a lot of resources on there if you want to check this out as well. But again, don't fret. All of these links and all of this information will be shared in a nice, well put email, so you don't have to do too much research as well. And lastly, I would say, make sure you reach out to any mentors, any teachers, any counselors. I think it's important to make sure that, this is a time for students to really ask questions. I know that maybe you might shy away from asking for help, but again, this is a time where it's just so important for you to be a self-advocate and really put your best foot forward. As much as I mentioned, make sure you stay up to date, make sure you stay connected. I think it's also important to note that you also want to find balance, to disconnect. And I would say that with anything like virtually related, I think it's important for students to find time to maybe just work on a resume, even if it's writing and not being in front of a screen. These are little things that I just want you all to remind yourselves of, and take each day at a time. I know this is a lot of information, and I know it can get very overwhelming, but just take each moment at a time. And I think that's very important to know. A few more websites that I wanted to highlight is scholarships.com, College Greenlight. I love the resources that they have to offer there, and check.com as well. Again, these are just a few of the many that are going to be shared in this email. But with that said, I wanted to open it up to questions and see if there was any questions from our students. You could either ask in the chat, you could private message me, or you could just ask for everyone to see that question. Shane, I love this question. Do you think the SAT subjects will still play a major role in merit-based scholarships? Shane, I think that's a great question. And although I'd love to say a blanket statement for all scholarship organizations, I can't really do that. But I will say that a lot of scholarship organizations are most likely going to have to look, if they do have that requirement, and revise it accordingly. And I would say that that's a question that you would directly want to ask that organization. For example, many of us may or may not know, but I know a lot of colleges that are actually not requiring the SAT or the ACT to be submitted, given the state of the pandemic. So that's a great question, Shane. Chloe,
Denise?
Yeah, go for it.
I will also add that the only, at least public, school system that I'm aware of that's still requiring them for their scholarships is Florida. So a lot of public institutions and private universities, even though the requirement's there because their application asks for those test scores year in and year out, will have some information on their website saying that they're looking at other attributes of students for the merit scholarships this year.
Thank you, Christina, for that. And then there is another question. Chloe's asking, how early is too early to apply for scholarships? I'm a freshman and wondering about the timeline for looking. Chloe, I would say that it's not too early for you to start your scholarship hunt. I would say that definitely start looking at scholarships that you could even apply to now, because not all scholarships are for high school seniors. And I think that's a big myth from students, like, oh, I have to wait till senior year to actually apply for scholarships. Again, Chloe, we're going to be sharing a resource handout for everyone that registered, whether they're on the call or not, as a resource for you all to start looking at it. But yeah, great question. Okay, Kaylee, Will there be scholarships for certain talents, even if you won't pursue that talent in the future? For example, I play piano, but I'm pursuing a career in the medical field. Would there still be scholarships for piano even if I'm not pursuing it? Oh yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. I think, and Christina can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a scholarship where it's like create a holiday greeting card. And that has nothing to do with students' majors, but maybe you really like art and that's a hobby of yours. You could easily just submit that. You'll fill it out, but you'll have to look at the eligibility requirements. And there are some scholarships that will say, though, that in order for you to receive their financial award, then you need to make sure that you provide proof that you're pursuing a specific major or career. And I don't know, Christina, do you have anything to add on that piece?
No, going back to what you shared at the beginning of your presentation, and you asked in the Menti poll, there's so many things out there related to hobbies one may have or interest one may have that have nothing to do, with your major. And so that's the great thing about scholarships is you can find one probably on any topic. There's scholarships out there if you're left-handed. There's scholarships out there if you're right-handed. And it's because they're done by private organizations or individuals that have a passion for a particular topic. And those are the students that they're looking for to apply for that money.
Thank you, Christina. Well, these were some awesome questions. Really, really appreciate them. But I know we're a little over time, but if anyone has any other questions at this time, please feel free to ask, or you can private message. But Christina and I really wanted to thank each and every one of you that made it to this call. And also, we will be having other events. So if you're interested to check them out, feel free to check out the Eventbrite link that's there. And thank you so much for the shout outs. Just got a private message. Thank you so much. I'm hopeful that this was very helpful for you. I would also love to hear any thoughts or any questions that you may have. You'll actually get an email directly from me, so if you have any questions of me, feel free to ask away. I'd be more than happy to help out. But thank you everyone for joining us today.